Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about some mediocre legendary lords that actually have pretty good starting situations, starting positions, without which they would struggle significantly in their campaigns. They wouldn't really have as good of a campaign as they have otherwise. Now this kind of video is obviously difficult to do, a bit more difficult to do, because there's actually very few legendary lords in the game where you can make this point where they're weak, but their starting position makes them strong. If someone's weak, generally they are weak. That's just really the way Warhammer 3 works. But at number 5, we have Rakarth of the Dark Elves. Now, Dark Elves are a pretty good race, all things considered. But Rakarth is, honestly, in a lot of ways, probably the worst Dark Elven campaign. It's not bad, but he just doesn't really have much going for him. Let me explain. So, faction-wide effects is that he can capture a variety of beasts and send them into battle. He doesn't get vigor penalties when he's in raiding stance, and you have a chance of adding monster units while raiding during that stance. So you can always recruit from the monster pens, and you can get a wide variety of monstrous units. Probably some of the best ones are beyond the dragons, of course, right? Some of the better ones are like the Medusae over here, or the Hydras, the War Hydras. But of course, there's a bunch of really solid units that you can recruit over here through the monster pens. And then you get the minus 10% upkeep for monstrous units. Now, here's the thing, though. Monstrous units, the good ones, the ones that are worth using, something like Harpies, are generally quite expensive. So you're not going to be running around with full stacks of these guys, even with Rakarth. That, I would say, is an issue in his campaign. He does get a recruitment duration of -1 turn for all monstrous units, melee defense, whiplash, beast lord's gaze, all those kind of benefits. And then when we're looking at his lord effects, you gets a minus 100% upkeep for Harpy units. But Harpy's just not really a great unit to use, kind of like a throwaway unit to use in battle. And I would say he probably could really benefit from an overall upkeep benefit to monstrous units in general in his campaign that's stronger than 10%, because it's just not really going to work over there as much. Now, when it comes to his start position, it is actually pretty good for him. He starts with the port, so he can get a Black Arc relatively quickly in his campaign once it's settlement to tier 2. So he's just going to need to get that growth in his campaign, and he can get that decently quick as well. But once he gets the growth, gets to tier 2, he'll be able to get the Black Arc and use it for unit recruitment. And he does have the Turtle Isles, which have 4 regions, which of course offer you a significant amount of economic potential. Your northern flank is somewhat secure, courtesy of the Dark Elves that do lie here to the north, though certainly some factions might be coming here, like the Hunts Marshal, which can put quite a bit of pressure on you. But the Hunts Marshal would first have to defeat the Bloodhole Coven in order to attack you from the north. So you're fairly secure from the north, and thus you can focus on the south. And you have a good amount of climate variety available in your campaign. In particular, you can take over jungle, and you can also make your way to Ulthuan. Now, this is great because it means that when that enemies will be coming for you from the direction where your main army is going to be in anyway. So you come here, you wipe out the Sentinels of Seti, you take over their territory, then you go in the Copper Desert, take out Tomb Kings over here, maybe fight the dwarves as well, or risk ignoring the dwarves, moving here, taking out the Cult of Sotek, dealing with these factions, and you can ally Skrulk. Now, this is important because Skrulk will fight Gorak, and he will fight the Cult of Sotek, but he'll generally lose that fight if he doesn't get any help. You are the help. And that means it is very possible to occupy a good stretch of land that's fairly secure, that's going to put you in a good position, and from which your enemies are not going to dislodge you very easily. Even though Rakarth's faction effects are pretty generic, and honestly, well, not generic, they're not, it's a unique campaign actually, but it's like not really that great, I would dare argue. At number 4, we have Tiktaq'to. Now, Tiktaq'to isn't a completely horrible lord, he just isn't really that great, I would argue. The problem is that while certainly he does have that ability for these flying units. This will only work so much. It can help you in some situations to drop those bombs on people, but it also might end up not doing really much at all in a battle, especially when we think about how the AI can handle that situation. He does get a major upkeep benefit for those units and flying units in general, and he also does have other abilities here in his special skill line that make him okay, but not amazing. I want to emphasize this aspect. He is okay, but he isn't really an amazing legendary lord in a lot of ways. That said, he is a genuine nuisance for anyone that starts a campaign near him, and there's a reason behind that. It's not because the Lizardmen are a great race. It's not because he's an amazing top-of-the-line legendary lord. No. It's because of his starting position. So, he starts in the Western Jungles. He starts with the Pterodon Hatchery at tier 2 already built. He's tier 2 capital as well. He's going to have quite a good start because of that. And he starts at war only with a minor greenskin faction that he can and will easily wipe out very, very quickly. And thus he's going to gain 2 entire provinces, maybe even 3 entire provinces when you're also considering the Southern Jungles. And after that, well, you got Teclis, and he's friendly towards you, believe it or not. And then Teclis, you can leave Teclis alone to deal with Kairos Fateweaver, and you go over here in the north and just start harassing all the factions of Khemri, which is what Tiktaq'to does when he's controlled by the AI in all of his campaigns. And or potentially start building the relationship between yourself and Krokvar in order to make a really solid relationship in the long term between the two of you, and then move over and orphan in Khemri and just take all of Khemri for yourself. See, you do need to defeat Sinch, and that is a genuine bloody annoyance to do so in a campaign. Absolutely. And you can't ignore Sinch, or you could and let Teclis handle it, but your territory is never going to be under threat from Sinch, from Kairos specifically. So that is obviously going to give you a good, solid, beneficial situation in your campaign. I would say an annoying thing in Tiktaq'to's campaign is you do need to head over to Lustra. You can't just spend the entire campaign over here in the Southlands. You do need to cross the ocean and head over into Lustra. But yeah, having a safe and secure start position where the factions around you are not going to harass you unless you declare war on them, that is a great thing. Like you do start with a non-aggression pact to Volkmar. Maybe you can make Volkmar an ally, and that would secure your position even further. And it's pretty easy, actually, to just get one up on Arkhan, take his capital, and then take his entire territory, which will give you another great position from which to expand across the campaign map. So yeah, Tiktaq'to does have things going for him, but I wouldn't say his faction effects, his armies, or anything like that are that amazing. They're okay, good, even dependent on the army you're dealing with. Like, I'd say against the vampire counts, sure, until they first swarm you with bats, and, well, given the AI benefits, those bats might actually win against you, but, or Vargheists, those will certainly tear your flying units to shreds. But if you're dealing with a melee-focused army, yeah, you do have certain advantages in this campaign. But it's really the start position. It's safe, it's secure. You only get to deal with one minor faction. And everyone else here is fighting each other. No one's going to be attacking you, AI aggression or not. At number 3, we have Queek Headtaker of the Skaven. Now, Queek isn't a bad legendary lord, or even really necessarily a mediocre legendary lord when we're looking at the broader context of the game, but for Skaven standards, when you're comparing him to Ikeclaw, Frot, or Snitch, yeah, he falls far behind. However, his campaign might be better than most other Skaven campaigns just because he has a good start position. So let's look at Queek. He does get the benefit to Clan Rats and Storm Vermin. He has a +2 hero capacity for chieftains, and he can use Menace Below far more often. He's also an absurd melee fighter. But again, Ikeclaw, Frot, Snitch are better. Hell, even in some ways, Skrulk is better when you're looking at his faction effects. But here's the thing. Queek has a much better starting position than Frot, Ikeclaw, and maybe even Skrulk. Depends on how you view the Skrulk situation. I personally played an entire campaign as Skrulk, and I made it work pretty quickly and effectively. Like, Skrulk has his own benefits in his start position. But we look at Queek, right? And one of the things is, like, you can pretty quickly, early on, get the trade partner that's going to give you a lot of money in your campaign. That's going to give you a lot of money, and give you some support. Don't expect them to help you out that much, but they're just going to keep some factions occupied that might bother you. That is important. You start with the Misty Mountain, and you're at war with the Red Fang Greenskins over here under Gorfang Rutgut. Now, what's important about this situation is that Skarbrand, you're one of the few factions that Skarbrand does not actively despise. In fact, you can go along very well with Skarbrand, so you can help secure your southern flank for quite a bit. And even though factions like Malagor and Wurzag may declare war on you, not necessarily so with Malagor, to be clear, they would have to march through provincial capitals for one provincial capital or another in order to take you out. So either Caracas Gal or the Crookfang Fort. That means your provinces are secure. And on top of that, the settlements in these provinces, from the Misty Mountain to Caracas Gal in the Blightwater province or the Eastern Badlands, they're all pretty close together. That means they're fairly secure. So it's very easy to defend this territory. It's easy enough to conquer it, to move from settlement to settlement. You do have the underway, so you're moving across the mountains very quickly, and then take over 3 entire provinces, 4 if you're counting Caracate Peaks, take over these entire provinces, and really benefit in this campaign in a fairly major way, and create a large and powerful Skaven empire. Like, look at Tretch Craventail. Tretch has to fight much more powerful factions. Like, all you're doing in this campaign, like, you're fighting one minor faction, then another minor faction, and another minor faction, and you're not really going to encounter a legendary lord for a while. Yes, Khalida might come in from the south and harass you, but she's going to have other issues to deal with, and besides, you can beat Khalida as well. And she's going to be coming through this narrow mountain pass that's, again, going to be pretty easy to defend. These are the advantages in Queek's campaign, and they're pretty major advantages when you consider the situation. Most people do hate Skaven, so having territory that's easy to defend, that's spread out the way the provinces that are near Queek are, really does help make his campaign significantly better. 2 is Kairos Fateweaver of Tzeentch. Kairos is one of the most terrible legendary lords in the entire game. Like, originally I wanted to call the poll for this list the most awful legendary lords in the game, because that's what I thought about. Like, when I was making this poll, this is the campaign that I was genuinely thinking about. Kairos Fateweaver. He honestly deserves to be put in the trash in every campaign. But here's the thing, if you're playing any other campaign and you're kind of like in the same area, you are going to have to deal with his overgrown chicken in your campaign, and he's not going to be so easy to deal with. I'll explain why. Because what Kairos will do very, very damn quickly in every single one of campaign, it feels like he's going to get the Man-Eye Tribute, and he's going to pump out Forsaken of Tzeentch, which are not necessarily the easiest Forsaken to deal with in a game. And then he's going to get Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch, which again are not necessarily the easiest to deal with either. So quite a few problems. Now, let me be clear, Kairos is awful to play. His army of short-range units is not great. Yes, Chaos Warriors work, but you need the Champions of Chaos DLC to make them work. Forsaken, you can... I'm not sure if Forsaken of Tzeentch, I think they are a baseline unit, so you can always recruit them. And they're pretty solid. Pretty solid all around. But he is an awful campaign. His lack of replenishment genuinely ruins his campaign. Far more so, I think, than any other campaign in the game. Like, I can complain all I want about the dwarves and others having poor replenishment, but then, genuinely speaking, Kairos is awful to deal with. That said, he starts at war with minor demonic factions that give him a lot of territory that will help him build a pathetic economy, but economy all the same. And it's not easy to attack Kairos. Teclis might be coming against you every single time, but you'll smash Teclis up, because the problem for the AI to deal with the Castaways, and the AI deals with the Castaways poorly in the southern Castaways, is they need to cross the sea, then they need to land here, and then which is going to consume their turns, then they need to spend turns attacking, and every step of the way, like once they're landing, they're taking corruption damage, and it's very, very easy to see their attacks coming because you have vision. You will have vision. You can also troll other factions as well. So Kairos really should be a legendary lord that gets thrown into the garbage and forgotten, but he ends up being, actually, of all the demonic faction, he ends up being the biggest threat in virtually every campaign that has to deal with him nearby. Far bigger than Akari or Skarbrand or Kugaf. Forget Kugaf. That's because it's very easy to take this territory. Oh, okay, but what about Oxyatl? Oxyatl is good legendary lord, but he's a good legendary lord that you need to know how to play him. The AI does not play him properly, and on top of that, the problem for Oxyatl when controlled by the AI is his auto-resolve chance is not really that good, and he doesn't use that army that he has, even in a manual battle, as effectively as it could be used. And so Oxyatl tends to lose against Kairos, and when you're losing against Kairos, sheesh, Oxyatl. Now, to be fair, if you're playing Oxyatl, you'll just walk over Kairos, but that's because you'll have all those blessed units, you'll have other benefits that the AI just doesn't have. So yeah, like when we were thinking about Kairos, he's got a great start position because he has no foes that can stop him early on, which means he can expand across a vast swath of territory that will form a very strong, solid empire. Other factions would kill to have this much territory that's so easy to grab in a campaign as quickly as Kairos can. And here's the thing, you can even wait for Oxyatl to have to deal with these guys like at Demon's Gate, and your western flank will be secure. Deal with Teclis quickly enough, take over all of this territory, and then just, go expand to the west. Or just try and help these guys out to keep Oxyatl at bay and eventually confederate them. That is where we're at between Kairos and between Kairos and his neighbors. If he was in a worse starting position, he would really suffer from it. I'm not saying this is an easy campaign. What I'm saying is that the start position really elevates this pretty awful Legendary Lord in a lot of ways. And finally, at number 1, with a ludicrous level of votes, actually, it is Count Noctilus. Sometimes I do get surprised by how people vote in these kind of things, but I can't exactly disagree necessarily in this case. It is Count Noctilus. Now, Count Noctilus starts with a horde army that you can easily turn into tier 2 and start getting artillery very, very quickly in his campaign as well. That is a pretty strong early game benefit that he does have over there. Here's the thing. The Vampire Coast is one of the worst races in the game because all of their units are crap in battle, they're bad in auto-resolve. They have good artillery, good heroes, but their army roster, with the exception of Depth Guard, as well as some of the monstrous units, are just like throwaway trash to use. Even so, Noctilus does benefit from his starting position. When I say start position, though, in his particular case, I'm not talking about like off the coast of Kalador where you're picking a fight with the High Elves. That is suicidal. I've done it. It isn't fun to have to deal with all of the sieges in High Elven settlements. Probably even less so now that they've removed minor settlement battles, so you can't just park your heroes inside a settlement and kill everything with artillery. You actually have to fight the field battle. But you can still use it in provincial capitals, of course. But what the major benefit for Noctilus in his campaign, the huge benefit, is starting with the Galleon's Graveyard. Here's why. The AI won't see the Galleon Graveyard unless, like, they need to first get vision, and it's far away enough from Tyrion that he's not necessarily going to do so very, very quickly. While the AI will generally attack via sea, they won't do so easily if they can't see where they're attacking. And that's the problem that Tyrion is actually going to have. One of the things I've noticed when Tyrion, controlled by AI, is going against AI Noctilus is the fact that sometimes he'll spend a lot of time wandering around, not doing anything until, like, basically Noctilus moves an army within Tyrion's vision, and then Tyrion moves a fleet to engage that army, and then he spots the Galleon Graveyard. That's the kind of situation where you see the Galleon Graveyard eliminated. So the Galleon Graveyard is a very secure location, and it does give you some, well, pretty powerful benefits to your artillery. Having a 10% missile strength for artillery is great. On top of that, the Vampire Coast is all about raiding the shores because they need to establish pirate coves to really get a lot of their heroes and a lot of campaign benefits. So starting in the middle of a sea and just moving around the world harassing the coasts is a really good decision as Noctilus. You're in a safe, secure position, and even if an army shows up to attack the Galleon's Graveyard, it's not going to be an easy fight for them either. It's interesting that they mention this as a mercenary when in reality it's raised dead. But a weird thing. So you can establish a lot of pirate coves on the coasts of Lustria in particular and really take advantage of the mechanic that the Vampire Coast does have and get a lot of heroes. The heroes are the strongest part of the Vampire Coast as a faction. And Noctilus, because of his position, he's in the prime position to take advantage of that. Now, as far as the legendary lords go of the Vampire Coast, I do believe Ironess is better because she just has a better army roster. She gets man-eaters, which of course are expensive, but they're still going to get the job done. And the Sartosa Free Company are pretty solid as well. Yeah, I know Aranessa is laughed at and mocked, but she's actually quite a bit better as a Legendary Lord, at least in Warhammer 3. Not necessarily in Warhammer 2. It's always interesting to see that perceptions of Legendary Lords have carried over from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3 even at this point. But yeah, Noctilus, good starting position, crap race. Not necessarily the best Legendary Lord either, though it should be mentioned that you can navigate the oceans pretty quickly between all of the benefits he can get in his campaign.